This is the India Migration Now Extra.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another edition of India Migration Now Extra. Today, we'll be joined by the author of Searching for Home Stories of Indians Living Abroad, Simran Chawla. Simran is based in the UK, in London, and for this book, she traveled far and wide around the world talking to Indian migrants of all kinds. Hi, Simran. Thank you for joining the India Migration Now Extra podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. We are big fans of your book. I myself have read it and I keep quoting stories. I'm always looking for anecdotes in our work when I talk to people. And I think your book has been a treasure trove on that front. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you.
So I just want to start off. There's so much in this book, and I think also an introduction that you covered. I just wanted to start off by how you end the book, which is your own experiences as a migrant. Can you just talk about your own experiences as a migrant?
Yeah. Well, firstly, my parents, they had immigrated from India to the US, in the 70s. And so I was just kind of born and raised in the US, and just I was always surrounded by that context of, immigration and the diaspora and things like that. So, I grew up surrounded by, a community of people who were like my parents and who kind of always had a backstory. Everyone had this connection back to a home that was, somewhere else. It was, in India. So I kind of was just always a part of that story. But then my own story is that, in my 20s, I ended up moving from the US to the UK. And, I got married, and my husband's from London. And like so many of the people who I interviewed for the book, my life plans just kind of went a bit zigzag along the way. We were only supposed to live in London for a year and then move back to the States. But, actually, 1 year turned into 2 years, into 3 years, and now it's been 8 years. And I'm still here, and I've got a house and a career. And so I can just relate to so many of the people that I interviewed because, I have a similar path and I'm familiar with it from my parents. So yeah, I just kind of have this personal experience and this personal connection, really.
I mean, along with your experience as a migrant, was there any specific incident or just a series of incidents, perhaps, which led you to write about migrants?
Yeah, I think it's a series of experiences, both just from like my upbringing and just like my general curiosity. Like whenever I meet people, I'm just curious that, well, how did you end up here? How did your family end up here?
Right.
And why? What, and are they happier here or there? Like I think I just kind of have this natural just curiosity about people. And so I think particularly when I moved to London and, suddenly I'm just exposed to so many people who are from everywhere, but, especially from India, I was just so pleased to just be learning about everyone's backstories. And I think in London compared to America, there are different stories, and people here have been here for generations sometimes,
right?
Or sometimes they've come via East Africa and then they've ended up in London, and so there's like a whole community of people who associates themselves back to East Africa. So I think, and then there's also contemporary stories, just seeing people on the train every day or seeing stories in the newspaper, you just think, God, there's so much happening and there's so many layers. There isn't just one story of migration. There's so many individual stories, and yeah, I think I'm just so drawn to that.
So I mean, just on that note, because it's a complex topic. So what does good migration storytelling involve?
I think it's about really trying to find good characters. trying to find people who are just willing to open up and be honest about their stories. People who are willing to be honest to say, it hasn't all been perfect. It hasn't been that, oh, I just moved here and suddenly I'm, a millionaire. People who are willing to say, actually, it was hard and these were the struggles and, or these were, the good things that happened. But I think it's finding, people who are willing to talk to you and share with you their experiences.
Right.
Um, and I think also when people are able to open up and like the stories that are a bit more honest, people just resonate with it and they can relate to it. And it's not, just an Indian story. It's so many people of any culture can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
moving abroad for opportunities or, having difficulties in a new place. So yeah, I think it's finding those stories that people can relate to.
As a writer, I mean, it's different from a researcher or a policymaker. So, what is the
Yeah.
role of literature in shaping perceptions
Hmm.
of migration?
Yeah, I think the role of literature in anything is, to humanize um, like a life event. Like it's one thing to be able to read something that's very factually based, and of course, my book is nonfiction, so there is research and data and things in there.
Of course.
But I think, to just be able to look beyond that and kind of dig in a little bit deeper, you have to be able to kind of humanize things. And I think whether it is fiction or nonfiction, that's really the role that, literature, art, all these things play. It's being able to, I don't know, I guess tell a story in a way that people can connect on that human level. And I think people are looking for that. Right now there's just so much noise from everywhere.
Right.
And I think people want to look past the noise and they want to understand, they want to feel, and they want to connect to people. And I think that's, the role that art, literature, storytelling, all of that plays a part in that.
So, I mean, in your book, I want to focus more on the book now. And one thing that I liked about the book, and even when I talk to my colleagues and people I interact with day to day in my work, was that you have covered like different kinds of migration stories. You have
Mm,
successful stories and unsuccessful stories and irregular migration and
yeah,
in all parts of the world from India.
yeah,
So just like you just talk about some of these stories and the challenges you face piecing them together.
yeah, sure. Um, So yeah, like you said, there is, a variety of stories covered in the book. And what I was really trying to do is that each chapter, I wanted it to be a different location. And I was trying to cover, like you mentioned, kind of a different aspect of, the migration story. So some of the locations are like London, Italy, Alaska, Belgium, Montreal. And, like you said, there were stories of, people, who were extremely successful and did really well. So, for example, Belgium and Antwerp, it's really, the chapter is focused on the
Right.
community. There's a diamond trading community there, and they are successful. And I was able to meet with people kind of in different generations who are, taking on the family business and expanding it. And, that was really great to see that. But then equally, there's stories like, for example, in London, where people come with these expectations of what they're going to do in London, but actually there's a real struggle there, and there's real life is happening right there, and they get trapped, and they're neither here nor there, and that is definitely something that's happening in many cities, not just London, but it was just so real for me to see it here in London. Then there was, let's see, there was in Italy. I think that's a story that's really resonated with a lot of people. People say that, that one really touched them. And that's really around this character of someone named Omkar. And he came to Italy thinking, he was a young man. He just thought he was going to work for a few years, send money back, and then go back himself. But decades later, he's still there, and he's now built this beautiful house in Italy, and he has successful children who, they're fluent in Italian and Punjabi and English. But equally, he's built a house back home in Punjab. Like that was always his dream. That was the whole point of him coming abroad. So now he's got these two homes, and the whole chapter is which is really his home, which one ultimately, where does he want to be? What,
Right, right.
how did he get caught between these two? And that's something that I think a lot of people have similar feelings to that.
And just want to like sort of quickly explore this connection with India, because
Hmm.
obviously we're speaking from Bombay in India here,
Yeah.
and and you're in London, and just wondering, do you have the sense, because you've managed to talk to migrants from India around the world, is there a sense of a greater Indian civilization which is beyond its border? Do you sense that now that you've talked to so many different characters?
Yes, yeah, that's so interesting, the way you said that. But originally, when I was thinking of the book, I had a few different titles in mind. But one of the titles that I had just kind of started with was Planet NRI. That, my God, anywhere on this planet, you're going to find somebody who is connected to India, who has
Right,
either come from India or something. And I think that connection, it is so strong. It's this like global network that is just
right.
like thriving all over the world. And I think in doing this book and meeting people in so many different locations who have such similar stories, but also such a like strong like bond, or like a strong I don't know, like feeling of India. I think that was really interesting to see that even people in Alaska, they're
Mm.
so physically isolated from, any kind of Indian physicality. But there was still, like there were the food, the culture, the language. It was just very much alive, and they were keeping it going. And yeah, I just think that's so interesting to see how that kind of manifests all around the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm just wondering, like, now that you've written this book, and
Hmm.
and it's like, do you see migration as an opportunity or a burden, given the different kind of outcomes of the characters in your book? And if so, how?
Hmm. Um, I think it's both. It's not like a straight one or the other.
Right.
And one of the other titles that I had in my mind when I was writing it was Settled. And I liked it
Ah,
because it was kind of a double play, and on the one hand, they go for these opportunities. Everyone moves for an opportunity, whether it's, money, jobs, adventure, love, whatever someone's motivation, you're going for an opportunity.
right.
And I think with settled, the idea that, you have settled abroad, you've made it, you've settled a house, you've settled a new career, that's really good. But then, what are you settling for? What compromises are you making? And I think everybody has to make those compromises. And I think everybody faces these decisions that they just never thought that they would have to make. And I think in the book, you'll see that there's, people who've had to kind of compromise on maybe their morals, like kind of
Mm,
moving illegally or trying to live under the radar.
right.
What have they given up to do that? Or people when they have children to have them grow up with this kind of dual cultural identity.
Right.
How do they navigate that? So I think it's a bit of both, or people, of course, and this is something I feel every day. You settle for being away from your family and missing out on life milestones and things like that. So I think there's always a give and take. There's certainly opportunity out there, but everything has a cost, I think.
For sure. Um, just coming back to you, what is the next step in your literary journey? Are there any particular, is there another book out there? Is there another issue, idea that consumes you currently?
Hmm. I think I'm still really touched by the stories in London. So the story, especially, there are stories of people who are still, even today, there are people from India who are struggling, they're homeless, they're really, in kind of dire situations. So I think that's something that's now kind of become very personal to me. So that's definitely
Right.
something that I'd like to pursue. And I want to make sure I tell that story and tell it properly, with respect and, yeah, just telling it properly. But otherwise, I think creative nonfiction, this is definitely my space. I do want to continue telling these real life stories from the diaspora all around the world, because I think there are so many stories, and I think, you know, telling these real life, kind of smaller, quieter stories, it's something that people can relate to, and it can tell a much bigger story, I think. So, yeah, you'll definitely be seeing more things coming from me.
Oh, amazing. One thing we ask before we sort of conclude is we always ask our guests, what are you reading right now? Is there something regarding migration? Could be anything, could be an article, could be a book. Is there something that you're reading right now?
Let's see. So I've read a few, so like fiction pieces, but recently I've also just finished reading The Good Immigrant, which I know it's probably something that was on your book list as
Yes.
well. So for me, that's like a format that really resonates with me, having, so many different voices all in one place. And I know that they're coming out with another version, I think, for the US audience. So that's something I'll be looking forward to reading, and something that I've recently just been reading.
Searching for Home by Simran Chawla. Simran, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best to you.